Everyone ignored her, except the man society ignored even more. On a freezing night, Emily was thrown out by her own husband with nothing to her name. No one stopped to help, until one stranger walked up and said, "Come with me." From that moment, two completely different worlds collided, and a truth powerful enough to change everything began to unfold. The sleet came down in sharp, slanted lines, slicing through the glow of the flickering neon sign above the South Side bus stop. It wasn't just cold. It was the kind of cold that sank into your bones and stayed there, the kind that made breathing feel like a mistake. The plastic shelter rattled every time a gust of wind tore through the empty street, and the metal bench inside had long since turned into something closer to ice than steel. Emily Carter sat at the far end of that bench, her hands clenched so tightly around a thin manila envelope that her knuckles had gone white. She didn't notice anymore. She couldn't feel them. 3 hours ago, she had been standing in the marble foyer of a penthouse 30 floors above downtown Chicago. 3 hours ago, the floors had been warm beneath her feet, the lighting soft, controlled, perfect. 3 hours ago, she had still believed that even if things were breaking, they could somehow be put back together. But then Daniel had opened the door. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't needed to. "You couldn't give me what I needed," he said, his voice flat, almost bored. "You never could. Let's not pretend anymore." He held the envelope out to her like it was something dirty, like it might stain him if he got too close. 7 years of marriage, and that was how it ended. Not with a fight, not with tears, just paperwork, and a door closing behind her. Emily had stood there for a long time after it shut, long enough for the hallway lights to dim automatically, long enough for the quiet to become unbearable. Then she walked. She didn't remember deciding to, she just moved. Now she was here, a bus stop no one cared about, a part of the city she had only ever seen through tinted windows, passing by at 30 miles an hour. Her dress, cream-colored, tailored, expensive, was soaked through. It clung to her skin in a way that made the cold worse, not better. Her heels were ruined, one strap half torn from where she had stumbled off a curb somewhere she couldn't recall. Her hair, once carefully styled that morning, hung in damp strands around her face. People passed her. A few glanced over. Most didn't. To them, she was just another woman who had lost something. Or everything. A man in a heavy coat paused at the edge of the shelter, looked her up and down, then shook his head slightly and kept walking. A group of teenagers laughed as they passed, their voices sharp and quick, disappearing into the wind. Somewhere down the street, a siren wailed, then faded. Emily lowered her gaze to the wet concrete beneath her shoes. Water dripped steadily from the edge of the shelter roof, tapping against the ground in a rhythm that felt too loud in the silence. She tried not to think, but thoughts came anyway. The way Daniel had looked at her, like she was already gone. The way he had said those words, like they were facts, not opinions. "You couldn't give me what I needed." Her throat tightened. She swallowed hard, forcing the feeling down. "I'm fine," she whispered under her breath, the words automatic, practiced. She had said them for years, to friends, to family, to herself. "Everything's fine." A gust of wind tore through the shelter, and she flinched as it cut straight through the thin fabric of her dress. Her body reacted before her mind could, shoulders curling inward, arms pulling closer to her chest. She wasn't fine. Her fingers had gone past numb. There was no pain anymore, just a strange, distant sensation, like they didn't belong to her at all. She pressed her hands between her knees, trying to trap whatever warmth she had left. A bus roared past without stopping, splashing slush up onto the curb. For a moment, the headlights illuminated her fully, her soaked clothes, her shaking frame, the envelope clutched like a lifeline. Then it was gone. Silence returned. Time stretched. 5 minutes. 10. Maybe more. She had stopped keeping track. She stared at nothing, thinking about everything, about where she could go, about who she could call, about the simple, terrifying truth that there was no one. Her phone was dead. Her purse, left behind in the rush, or maybe taken, she couldn't even remember, was gone. Her name, her status, everything that had once defined her, meant nothing here. She was just a woman sitting in the cold. Alone. The sound of footsteps cut through the noise of the wind. At first, she didn't react. People had been passing by all night. But these footsteps were different. Slower. Deliberate. They didn't rush past. They came closer. She felt it before she saw it. That subtle shift, the awareness of being watched. Emily turned her face slightly toward the darker end of the street, instinctively trying to avoid eye contact. The last thing she wanted was another look, another judgment. But the footsteps stopped right in front of her. Close, too close to ignore. Hey. The voice was low, careful, not loud, not demanding, just there. She hesitated for a second, then slowly lifted her eyes. A man stood a few feet away, holding an umbrella that barely held against the wind. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a worn jacket that had seen better days. Snow clung to the edges of his sleeves, melting into dark patches. His face was tired, not just from tonight, but from something deeper, something that had been building for years. Behind him, two small figures shifted in the cold, half hidden by the umbrella's shadow. Emily blinked, trying to focus. The man's gaze met hers, steady but not invasive. He wasn't looking at her the way the others had, not with dismissal, not with curiosity. He was assessing, concerned. "You doing okay?" he asked. The question hung in the air, simple and impossible at the same time. Emily opened her mouth. "I'm fine," she said automatically. The words sounded hollow the second they left her lips. The man didn't move, didn't nod, didn't walk away. He just stood there, watching her, as if he could see straight through the answer she had given. Behind him, one of the small figures stepped forward slightly, peeking out from under the umbrella. A child. Wide eyes, curious, unfiltered. The wind picked up again, rattling the shelter, carrying the cold straight through her. Emily tightened her grip on the envelope without realizing it. The man shifted his weight, still not leaving, and for the first time all night, someone didn't look away. Who was he? And why wasn't he walking past like everyone else? The wind pushed harder against the shelter, rattling the thin plastic walls, but he didn't step back. He stood his ground like he had all the time in the world. Like the cold didn't matter, like she wasn't just another person to avoid. Emily held his gaze for a second too long, then looked away first. "I said I'm fine," she repeated, sharper this time, trying to rebuild whatever dignity she had left. The man exhaled slowly, not annoyed, not offended, just patient. "Yeah," he said, "I heard you." Behind him, the little boy shifted again, slipping out from under the umbrella. He couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, bundled in a jacket that was clearly too big for him, the sleeves covering half his hands. "You're not fine," the boy said plainly. Eli, the man murmured, not scolding, just steady. But she's not, the boy insisted, stepping a little closer. His eyes were wide, open in a way that only kids could manage. No filters, no hesitation. She's shaking. Emily felt something twist inside her chest. Not warmth, she was too cold for that, but something uncomfortable, something real. "I'm just cold," she said quietly. "That's what I said," the boy replied, like that settled it. The man crouched down slightly so he was closer to her level. Up close, she could see the details she'd missed before. The faint lines at the corners of his eyes. The exhaustion that didn't come from one bad night, but from years of carrying too much. "You got someone coming to pick you up?" he asked. Emily's first instinct was to lie. She had always been good at that. Smiling through dinners she didn't enjoy. Saying everything was fine when it wasn't. Pretending her life made sense, even when it didn't. But something about the way he asked made the lie feel pointless. "No," she said. The word landed heavier than she expected. The man nodded once, like he had already figured that out. A car drove past, headlights sweeping across them, illuminating the scene for a brief second. Him standing there, steady and unmoved, her sitting there like she had nowhere left to go. Because she didn't. From the corner of her eye, Emily noticed someone else watching. A woman standing near the edge of the shelter, arms crossed, eyes flicking between them with thinly veiled judgment. She leaned toward another man beside her and muttered something under her breath. Emily didn't catch the words, but she didn't need to. She knew that look. The man saw it too. He stood up slowly, adjusting his grip on the umbrella, and for a moment, something in his expression changed. Not anger, something quieter, something tired. "People always got something to say," he muttered, mostly to himself. The woman scoffed, loud enough now. "You trying to play hero or something?" The man didn't even look at her. "Nah," he said calmly, "just not trying to be the guy who walks away." The man beside her laughed under his breath. "Man, you wasting your time." Emily felt her stomach tighten. The air in the shelter shifted, thick with something unspoken. Familiar. Marcus, because she didn't know his name yet, but she would, stood there in that space, caught between being ignored and being mocked, like it wasn't new to him. Like it happened all the time. And still, he didn't move. He reached up and unwound the scarf from around his neck. It was simple, dark, worn soft from use. Without hesitation, he held it out toward her. "Here," he said. Emily stared at it. "I can't take that," she said immediately. "You need it." He gave a small shrug. "I'll be all right." "I don't even know you." "That's true." A faint, almost amused look touched the corner of his mouth. "But you're still freezing." She hesitated. Everything in her told her not to take it, not to accept help from a stranger, not to owe anyone anything. But her hands were shaking harder now. The boy, Eli, stepped forward again, nudging the scarf slightly closer to her. "Just take it," he said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Emily let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Slowly, she reached out. Her fingers brushed against his as she took the scarf. His skin was warm, solid, real. She wrapped it around her shoulders, the fabric instantly holding in what little heat she had left. It smelled faintly of detergent and something else, something like coffee and cold air. For the first time in hours, The edge of the cold pulled back just a little. She closed her eyes for a second. Just one. When she opened them again, he was still there, still watching. Not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but in a way that felt deliberate, like he was trying to understand the situation, not judge it. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated again. Then, quietly, "Emily." He nodded. "Marcus." He tilted his head slightly toward the boy. "This is Eli." Eli gave her a small wave, like they had just met somewhere normal, somewhere warm. Emily almost smiled. Almost. A loud engine roared in the distance, growing closer, then fading again. No bus. Not for her. Marcus glanced down the empty street, then back at her. "Last bus came through already," he said. "Nothing else running tonight." "I know," she said softly. "You been here long?" She didn't answer. He didn't push. The wind picked up again, harder this time, driving sleet sideways into the shelter. It slipped through the gaps, stinging her face, cutting through whatever warmth the scarf had given her. Eli stepped back under the umbrella, shivering. Marcus looked between the two of them. Then he made a decision. "Look," he said, his voice steady. "We live about 10 minutes from here." Emily's head snapped up. "It's not much," he continued, "but it's warm. Kids got beds, couches free." She stared at him. "You don't know me," she said. "I know you're out here in this," he replied, gesturing to the storm. "That's enough." The woman near the shelter scoffed again.
You serious right now?
Marcus ignored her. Emily's heart started to pound, not from fear of the cold this time, but from something else, something deeper. This wasn't just a scarf. This was an invitation, a choice. Her mind raced through every reason to say no, every warning she had ever been taught, every story she had ever heard about trusting the wrong person. But then she looked down at her hands, still shaking, looked at the empty street, looked at the people who had passed her all night without stopping. Then she looked back at him. He wasn't rushing her, wasn't pushing, just offering. Eli tugged lightly on his sleeve. "Dad," he whispered, "she can come, right?" Marcus didn't take his eyes off Emily. "That's up to her," he said. The wind howled again, louder than before, rattling everything around them. Emily swallowed hard. If she stayed here, she knew what that meant. If she went with him, she had no idea. That was the terrifying part. She tightened the scarf around her shoulders.
Looked at Marcus.
And for the first time all night, she didn't feel completely invisible.
Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Just for tonight,"
she said.
Marcus nodded once.
"Just for tonight." Eli smiled, like something had already gone right. And as Marcus stepped aside, holding the umbrella out just enough for her to step under it, Emily realized she had already made the most important decision of the night.
She stood up.
Her legs trembled, and she followed him out into the storm, not knowing that this one step would change everything. The wind hit them the moment they stepped out from under the shelter. It wasn't just cold, it was forceful, almost angry, pushing against them as if the night itself didn't want her to leave that bench. The umbrella tilted in Marcus's hand, barely holding its shape as sleet tapped against it in sharp, relentless bursts. "Stay close," he said, angling the umbrella so it covered Emily and Eli as much as possible. Emily nodded, though her legs felt unsteady beneath her. The ground was slick, the thin layer of ice making every step uncertain. Her heels slipped once, and she instinctively reached out. Marcus caught her elbow without hesitation. "Easy," he said. His grip was firm, steady, but he let go as soon as she found her balance again. No lingering, no assumption. That small detail didn't go unnoticed. They moved down the sidewalk together, the streetlights casting long, wavering reflections across the wet pavement. Cars passed occasionally, tires hissing against slush, but no one slowed. No one looked. Eli walked between them, one small hand gripping the edge of his father's jacket, the other swinging freely. He seemed unfazed by the cold, his voice filling the quiet spaces between gusts of wind. "You ever seen snow like this before?" he asked Emily, looking up at her. She blinked, caught off guard. Not like this," she admitted. "This isn't real snow," Eli said with absolute confidence. "It's like fake snow. It can't decide what it wants to be." Marcus huffed a quiet laugh. "That's called sleet, man." "Yeah, but it's confused," Eli insisted. "Real snow is better." Emily found herself nodding slightly. "I think I agree with you." Eli grinned, satisfied. They walked another block in silence. The city around them felt different at this hour. Quieter, but not peaceful. Just paused, like everything was waiting for morning. Emily glanced sideways at Marcus. "You didn't have to do this," she said after a moment. He didn't look at her. "Yeah," he said simply. That was it. No explanation, no speech. Just a quiet acknowledgement that he knew exactly what he was doing, and that he had chosen it anyway. They turned onto a narrower street, lined with older brick buildings. Paint peeled from window frames. A flickering porch light buzzed somewhere above them. A dog barked in the distance, then another answered. This wasn't a place Emily had ever been before. Not really. She had seen neighborhoods like this from the inside of a car, through glass that kept the world at a distance. It had always been something else, somewhere else. Now she was in it, and it felt real in a way her old life hadn't. Marcus stopped in front of a 3-story walk-up with a rusted metal gate. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a key ring, and pushed the gate open with his shoulder. "Watch your step," he said. The entryway smelled faintly of damp concrete and old paint. A single overhead light flickered, casting uneven shadows across the narrow stairwell. Eli ran ahead, bounding up the first few steps. "Hey!" Marcus called after him. "Slow down!" "I'm not even going fast!" Eli shot back, already halfway up the second flight. Emily followed more carefully, one hand trailing along the cold railing. Her body felt heavy now, the adrenaline of the last few hours starting to wear off, leaving behind a deep, bone-tired exhaustion. By the time they reached the second floor, her breath had gone shallow. Marcus noticed. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded, though it wasn't entirely true. "Just tired." Almost there. They reached the third floor, and Marcus unlocked a door at the end of the hallway. The hinges creaked slightly as he pushed it open. Warmth hit her first. Not overwhelming, not perfect, but real. Enough to make her shoulders drop just a little. "Come in," he said. Emily stepped inside slowly. The apartment was small. 2 rooms opened into a narrow living space, with a kitchen tucked into one corner. The furniture didn't match. The couch had a worn armrest. A small table sat near the window, covered in papers and a single flickering lamp. But it was clean, lived in, alive. A faint smell of something cooked earlier lingered in the air. Spices, maybe, or something simple that had been stretched to feed more than it should have. Eli kicked off his shoes near the door and ran straight into the living room. "I'm getting the blanket," he announced. Marcus shook his head slightly, then turned to Emily. "Sorry," he said. "It's not much." She looked around again, taking in the details she had never noticed before in places like this. The small shoes lined up by the wall, the drawings taped unevenly to the fridge, the quiet hum of a heater working harder than it should. "It's warm," she said, and she meant it. Marcus nodded like that was enough. "Go ahead," he said, gesturing toward the couch. "Sit down. I'll grab you something hot." She hesitated for a second, then moved toward the couch, lowering herself carefully onto the edge of it. The cushions dipped beneath her, soft and worn. Her body reacted before her mind could. Her hands stopped shaking. Not completely, but enough that she noticed. That alone felt strange. Eli returned a moment later, dragging a thick blanket behind him. It was oversized, clearly used often, edges slightly frayed. "Here," he said, handing it to her. Emily took it, wrapping it around her shoulders over the scarf. The added warmth settled into her slowly, like her body didn't quite trust it yet. "Thank you," she said. Eli shrugged like it was nothing. "We got more." Marcus moved quietly in the kitchen, filling a pot with water, setting it on the stove. The soft click of the burner, the low hum of heat. It was a simple sound, but it filled the room in a way that made the silence feel less empty. Emily watched him for a moment. "You have 2 kids?" she asked. He nodded. "Yeah, Eli, and his sister's asleep already. She's got school in the morning." "You work nights?" "Sometimes, whenever I can." The water began to heat, small bubbles forming at the bottom of the pot. Emily looked down at her hands again. Still, not shaking. Her chest tightened slightly. That hadn't happened in a long time. Marcus turned back toward her, leaning lightly against the counter. "You hungry?" he asked. She almost said no. The word was right there, ready, polite, automatic. But then her stomach answered for her, a quiet, undeniable twist. "Yeah," she admitted. He nodded once, like that settled it. "Ain't fancy," he said, reaching into a cabinet, "but it's hot." He pulled out a couple of bowls, moving with the ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. No hesitation, no performance, just doing what needed to be done. Emily watched him, something unfamiliar settling in her chest. No one had asked her if she was hungry in a long time. Not like this, not without expecting something in return. Eli climbed onto the couch beside her, curling up under the edge of the blanket like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You can stay here tonight," he said matter-of-factly. "Dad won't let you go back out there." Marcus glanced over, raising an eyebrow slightly. Eli shrugged. "What? It's true." Emily looked between them, then down at the blanket around her shoulders, then at her hands, still steady. She let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Just for tonight, she reminded herself. Just one night. But something deep inside her, something she didn't fully understand yet, whispered a quiet question she wasn't ready to answer. What if one night wasn't the only thing this was going to be? The water on the stove began to boil, a soft rolling sound that filled the small kitchen. Marcus moved with quiet efficiency, opening a cabinet, pulling out a can, then another. The simple rhythm of it, open, pour, stir, felt almost hypnotic. Emily watched him from the couch, the blanket wrapped tight around her shoulders. Eli had leaned against her side at some point, his small frame warm and steady, his breathing already slowing as sleep crept up on him. It startled her, not just that he trusted her, but that she hadn't moved away. Marcus glanced over his shoulder. "You all right with soup?" he asked. Emily blinked, pulled back from her thoughts. "Yeah, that's perfect." He nodded once, like that was all he needed, and kept stirring. The room settled into a quiet that wasn't empty. The heater clicked softly in the corner. The wind still pressed against the windows, but it felt distant now, like it belonged to another world. Emily let her eyes move slowly around the apartment. There were drawings taped to the refrigerator. Crayon lines, uneven shapes, bright colors that didn't stay inside the edges. A small calendar hung beside it, filled with handwritten notes and crossed-out days. A pair of sneakers sat by the door, scuffed and worn, but neatly placed side by side. Nothing matched. Nothing was perfect. And yet, everything had a place. Her chest tightened slightly. This wasn't how she had imagined people lived. Not really. Not beyond what she'd seen in passing, filtered through assumptions she'd never questioned. Marcus turned off the stove and ladled the soup into 2 bowls. He set one on the small table near her, then handed her a spoon. "Careful, it's hot." She reached for it, her fingers brushing the warmth of the bowl. The heat seeped into her skin immediately, a sharp contrast to the cold that still lingered in her bones. "Thank you," she said quietly. Marcus shrugged, leaning back against the counter again with his own bowl. "It's just soup." But it wasn't just soup. Emily lifted the spoon, blowing gently before taking a small bite. It was simple: beans, broth, a few vegetables, but it was warm. Real. Her body reacted instantly, a subtle easing she couldn't control. She hadn't realized how hungry she was. Eli shifted beside her, his head dropping fully against her arm now. Within seconds, he was asleep. Emily froze slightly, unsure what to do. Marcus noticed and gave a small nod. He'll crash anywhere if he's tired enough. "You don't wake him?" Marcus shook his head. "Nah, kid's been running all day. Let him rest." Emily looked down at the boy leaning against her, his breathing steady, completely unguarded. No hesitation, no fear. Just trust. It made something in her chest ache in a way she didn't expect. "You're good with them," she said softly. Marcus let out a quiet breath, almost like a laugh, but not quite. "I try. That's more than most people do." He glanced at her then, something thoughtful flickering in his eyes. "You got kids?" The question landed harder than it should have. Emily's grip tightened slightly around the spoon. "No," she said. A pause. That was kind of the problem. Marcus didn't respond right away. He just nodded slowly, like he understood more than she had said. "Yeah," he said after a moment. "People got a way of turning things into problems when they don't understand them." Emily looked up at him, surprised. He didn't elaborate, didn't ask more questions, just left the space open. And somehow, that made it easier to breathe. They ate in quiet after that, not awkward, not forced, just quiet, the kind that didn't demand anything. When she finished, Emily set the bowl down carefully, her hands steady now, completely steady. She noticed, really noticed. Her fingers weren't trembling. Her shoulders weren't tight. Her breath wasn't shallow. For the first time in hours, maybe longer, her body wasn't bracing for something. That realization hit her harder than anything else had that night. Marcus took her bowl without a word, rinsing it in the sink. "You can take the couch," he said. "I'll grab some blankets." "You don't have to. It's fine." He didn't argue, didn't make it a conversation, just handled it. Emily watched as he moved around the room, pulling out a thicker blanket from a small closet, adjusting a pillow on the couch. Every movement was practical, intentional. No hesitation, no expectation of thanks. She stood slowly, the blanket slipping slightly from her shoulders as she moved. "Marcus," she said. He glanced up. "I mean it. You didn't have to do this." He studied her for a second, then gave a small shrug. "Maybe not," he said, "but I got kids watching me." Emily frowned slightly, not understanding. Marcus nodded toward the hallway where the other room was. "They see everything," he continued. "What I do, what I don't do, what I walk past." He paused, then added quietly, "I gotta make sure they learn the right things." The words settled into the room, heavier than they sounded. Emily felt them land somewhere deep inside her. Not dramatic, not loud, just true. She nodded slowly. "I think they already are." Marcus didn't respond to that. He just adjusted the blanket once more, then stepped back. "You'll be all right here," he said. Emily looked at the couch, then back at him. "Good night," she said softly. "Yeah," he replied. "Get some rest." He turned off the main light, leaving only the soft glow of the lamp near the window. The room dimmed, shadows stretching along the walls. Emily lay down slowly, pulling the blanket up around her. The couch wasn't comfortable, not really. The pillow was thin. The air carried the faint hum of the heater and the distant sound of traffic outside. But it was warm and safe. Eli stirred beside her, shifting slightly before settling again. Emily stared up at the ceiling. She waited for the thoughts to come rushing back, for the fear, for the voice that had followed her for years, the one that whispered she wasn't enough, that she never had been. But tonight, it was quieter, not gone, just further away. Her eyes drifted toward the kitchen, where Marcus stood for a moment longer, looking out the window at the storm. Then he turned off the light. Darkness settled fully over the apartment. Emily closed her eyes. And for the first time since the door had closed behind her earlier that night, sleep came before the fear. Outside, the sleet kept falling, but inside, something had shifted. Something small, something fragile, something she didn't yet have a name for. And she didn't realize it yet, but this wasn't just a place to stay. It was the first place in a long time where she didn't feel like she had to disappear. Emily didn't realize she had fallen asleep until the sound of something soft hitting the floor pulled her back. For a second, she didn't know where she was. The ceiling above her was unfamiliar. The air was warmer than it had any right to be, and the blanket wrapped around her shoulders wasn't hers. Then it came back. The bus stop, the storm, the man named Marcus, the couch, Eli. She shifted slightly, careful not to wake the boy still curled beside her. He had somehow turned in his sleep, one arm draped loosely across her side, like it had always belonged there. Emily stared at that small hand for a moment. It didn't make sense. Nothing about this did. A quiet clatter came from the kitchen. She lifted her head just enough to see Marcus standing at the stove, already dressed, moving through the same steady rhythm as the night before. The morning light filtered weakly through the window, gray and thin, casting long shadows across the room. It was early. Too early. "You can go back to sleep," Marcus said, without turning around. Emily blinked. "I didn't mean to." "You didn't wake me," he said. "I've been up." Of course he had. She pushed herself up slowly, easing out from under Eli's arm. He stirred for a second, then settled again, still asleep. "How long do you usually sleep?" she asked quietly. Marcus let out a small breath, almost amused. "Depends how lucky I get." That wasn't a joke. Emily felt it. She stood, wrapping the blanket tighter around herself as she walked toward the kitchen. The floor was cold under her bare feet, but nothing like the night before. "What time is it?" "Just past 6. She glanced toward the hallway. "Your daughter?" "Still asleep. Gotta get her up soon." Marcus poured coffee into a chipped mug, then another. He slid one across the counter toward her. "Careful," he said. "It's strong." Emily hesitated, then picked it up. The warmth seeped into her hands immediately, grounding her. "Thank you," she said. Marcus nodded, leaning back against the counter again. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet felt different in the morning, less heavy, less uncertain. Emily took a small sip of the coffee. It was bitter, stronger than what she was used to, but it woke something up in her. "You do this every day?" she asked. Marcus raised an eyebrow slightly. "Drink coffee?" She almost smiled. "No, all of it. Wake up this early, work, take care of everything?" He shrugged like it wasn't worth talking about. "Someone's got to do it." "That someone is always you?" He didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, "Yeah." Emily looked at him more carefully now, in the light of day. She saw the details she had missed before. The faint crease in his shirt where it had been folded and worn again. The slight wear on his boots. The way his hands carried small scars, rough from work. This wasn't just one job. This was a life built on doing whatever it took. "You said you work nights," she said. "And mornings?" "Whenever I can," he replied. "Uber, deliveries, sometimes the kitchen down the street if they need an extra hand." Emily frowned slightly. "That's a lot." "Yeah. No complaint, no pride, just fact." "Why?" she asked before she could stop herself. Marcus looked at her then. "Why what?" "Why all of it?" she said. "You could, I don't know, do something easier." The moment the words left her mouth, she knew they were wrong. Not offensive, just disconnected. Marcus didn't react the way she expected. He didn't get angry, didn't shut down. He just looked at her for a long second. Then he gave a small nod, like he understood exactly where the question had come from. "Easier don't always exist," he said simply. Emily swallowed. He turned back to the stove, flipping something in a pan. "Eggs?" he asked. She nodded automatically. "Yeah, thank you." He moved with the same quiet focus, cracking eggs into the pan, stirring them slowly. The smell filled the room, simple but comforting. Eli shuffled into the kitchen a moment later, hair sticking up in every direction, still half asleep. "Morning," he mumbled. "Morning," Marcus said. "Go wash up." Eli nodded and disappeared down the hallway. Emily leaned lightly against the counter, watching everything unfold.
It was ordinary.
And yet, it felt completely unfamiliar. A small voice came from the hallway a minute later. His daughter. Sleepy, slightly irritated, complaining about something she couldn't quite articulate yet. Marcus smiled faintly. "Give her 5 minutes," he said. "She'll be talking non-stop." Emily nodded, unsure what to say. She wasn't used to this. Not the noise, not the movement, not the life. When Eli came back, Marcus handed him a plate without hesitation. His daughter followed shortly after, her hair pulled into a loose, uneven ponytail, rubbing her eyes as she walked into the kitchen. She stopped when she saw Emily. For a second, There was silence. Then, simply, "Hi." "Hi," Emily replied. No questions, no suspicion, just acceptance. Marcus set another plate on the table. "Eat. Bus comes in 30. The morning moved quickly after that. Shoes were found, backpacks were checked. A missing homework sheet caused brief panic before it was located under the couch. Emily stood slightly off to the side, watching it all happen. And then, without really thinking about it, she stepped forward. "Here," she said, reaching for a backpack strap that had twisted awkwardly. "You're going to trip over this." The girl blinked at her, then nodded. "Thanks." It was small, insignificant even, but it felt like crossing a line. By the time the kids were out the door, the apartment felt suddenly quiet again. Marcus grabbed his jacket, keys already in hand. "You can stay here today," he said. "Rest, warm up." Emily hesitated. "I don't want to." "It's fine," he cut in gently. "Just lock up if you head out." She nodded slowly. "Marcus," she said before he could leave. He paused at the door. "Why did you really help me?" The question hung there. He didn't answer right away. Then he looked back at her, something steady in his expression. "Because I know what it looks like," he said. What looks like?" "Being out there," he replied, nodding slightly toward the window. "And nobody stopping." Emily felt something tighten in her chest. Marcus gave a small nod, like that was enough explanation. Then he stepped out into the hallway, the door closing quietly behind him. Emily stood there for a long moment, staring at the space he had just left. "Because I know what it looks like." She walked slowly to the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to see the street below. Marcus stepped out into the cold again, pulling his jacket tighter around him, moving with the same quiet determination as the night before. No hesitation, no complaint. Just doing what needed to be done. Emily pressed her hand lightly against the glass. For the first time, she wondered something she hadn't allowed herself to consider before. Not about herself, but about him. What had he lost to understand her so clearly? And why had no one ever stopped for him? The question stayed with Emily long after Marcus disappeared down the street. It followed her as she stood in the quiet apartment, the morning light slowly shifting across the worn kitchen floor. It followed her as she rinsed the coffee mug and set it carefully in the drying rack, unsure if she was allowed to, but doing it anyway. It followed her when she sat back down on the couch and realized she didn't know what to do next. For years, every hour of her day had been scheduled. Meetings, calls, dinners, expectations layered on top of expectations until there was no space left to ask simple questions like, "What do I do now?" Now there was nothing but space, and it felt louder than anything else. Emily pulled the blanket tighter around herself and looked toward the small stack of papers she had set on the table the night before. The envelope. The one she had carried through the storm like it was the only thing that still belonged to her. She stared at it for a long time before reaching for it. Her fingers hesitated just above the paper. Then she opened it. The words were exactly the same as she remembered.
Legal language. Cold. Final. A life reduced to sections and signatures.
She skimmed past most of it until her eyes caught something she hadn't fully processed the night before.
Ass division.
Her breath slowed. There were numbers there, numbers that didn't match what Daniel had said, numbers that didn't match what she had been told about what she had and what she didn't. Her brows furrowed slightly.
That wasn't right.
She read it again, slower this time. A faint unease crept into her chest.
Something had been hidden.
Or maybe rushed. Or maybe she had just never looked closely enough before. The thought unsettled her. Emily set the papers down, her mind suddenly more awake than it had been all morning. A knock at the door broke the silence. She froze. Another knock, louder this time. Her heart picked up instantly, old instincts snapping back into place. No one should be here. Marcus had said the kids were at school. He was at work. No one else knew she was here. The knock came again. "Marcus?" a voice called from the other side. Male, familiar in a way she couldn't immediately place. Emily stepped slowly toward the door, her pulse loud in her ears. She hesitated with her hand on the handle, then opened it just a crack. A man stood in the hallway. Mid-40s, clean coat, polished shoes that didn't belong in this building. His expression shifted the moment he saw her. Emily, her breath caught. Daniel? For a second, neither of them moved. Then his eyes swept past her, taking in the apartment behind her, the couch, the kitchen, the unmistakable reality of where she was. "This is where you are?" he asked, his tone sharp, disbelief barely hidden. Emily straightened slightly, instinctively pulling the blanket tighter around herself. "How did you find me?" He ignored the question. "I've been calling," he said. "You left your phone." "I didn't take it on purpose." Clearly. His gaze moved again, slower this time, more deliberate. "This isn't temporary, is it?" he asked, a note of something colder creeping into his voice. Emily felt that familiar tightening in her chest. The old version of herself would have rushed to explain, to justify, to make it make sense. But that version felt further away this morning. "I'm staying here," she said. Daniel let out a short, humorless laugh. "You're staying here." The words echoed differently now. Not truth, judgment. "You had options, Emily," he continued. "You didn't have to do this." "Didn't I?" His expression hardened. "Don't start that." She didn't back down. "You handed me papers and closed the door," she said, her voice steady despite the way her hands tightened at her sides. "That wasn't exactly an invitation to discuss options." A flicker of irritation crossed his face. "This doesn't have to be complicated," he said, lowering his voice slightly, as if that made it reasonable. "You can come back. We can handle this differently." Emily stared at him. "You mean quietly," she said. His jaw tightened. "I mean correctly." The word sat between them, heavy. From down the hall, a door creaked open. A neighbor peeked out briefly, eyes flicking between them before retreating again. Daniel noticed. Of course he did. "This isn't the place for this conversation," he said, his tone shifting again, controlled but urgent now. "Come with me. We'll talk somewhere appropriate." Emily felt something shift inside her. Not fear. Not exactly. More like clarity. "No." The word surprised even her. Daniel blinked. "What?" "I'm not going anywhere with you." Silence. For a second, the hallway felt too small, the air too tight. Then Daniel's expression changed again. Not anger, something sharper. "Do you have any idea what you're walking away from?" he asked quietly. Emily thought of the penthouse, the dinners, the life that had looked perfect from the outside. Then she thought of the night before, the cold, the bench, Marcus, Eli's hand in hers, the way no one had stopped, except one person. "Yes," she said. Daniel studied her for a long moment. "You're making a mistake," he said finally. "Maybe," she replied. Another pause. Then his gaze shifted past her again. "Who is he?" Daniel asked. Emily didn't answer. "I saw him last night," Daniel continued, "at the bus stop. You think I didn't notice?" Her stomach dropped slightly. "He's nothing," Daniel said flatly. "A stranger. And you're throwing everything away for what exactly?" That was the moment something inside her snapped into place. Not anger, not yet. Just certainty. "He's the only person who stopped," she said. Daniel frowned slightly, like he didn't understand the weight of that. "That doesn't mean anything," he said. Emily met his eyes. "It does to me." The words hung there, quiet but immovable. For the first time since he had arrived, Daniel had no immediate response. His jaw tightened again, but this time there was something else behind it. Something uncertain. "You don't belong here," he said finally. Emily felt the words hit, felt the old voice try to rise up again. "You don't belong." But this time, it didn't land the same way. She looked past him, out the narrow hallway, toward the world beyond the building. Then back at him. "Maybe I do," she said. The silence that followed was different. He didn't argue, didn't push. He just stood there for a moment longer, studying her like he was seeing something he hadn't expected. Then he stepped back. "This isn't over," he said. Emily didn't respond. He turned and walked down the hallway, his footsteps echoing against the worn floors until they disappeared completely. The door remained open for a second longer. Then Emily closed it, slowly. She leaned back against it, her breath uneven. The room felt quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet as before. This one felt like something had shifted. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, Emily looked down at her hands. Still steady. And for the first time, she wasn't just wondering about Marcus anymore. She was starting to understand something much bigger. The world she had come from and the world she had stepped into were about to collide. And she had just chosen a side. The apartment felt smaller after Daniel left. Not physically, but in a way that pressed against Emily's thoughts, tightening everything inside her chest. The quiet no longer felt gentle. It felt charged, like something had been set in motion that couldn't be undone. She pushed herself off the door slowly, her fingers lingering on the handle as if part of her expected him to come back. He didn't. Outside, a car door slammed somewhere down the block. Life continued, indifferent to what had just happened. Emily walked back into the living room, her steps slower now, heavier with the weight of what she had said. "Maybe I do." The words echoed in her mind. She hadn't just said them to Daniel. She had said them to herself. And that was the part that scared her. She sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the envelope still lying open on the table. The papers inside seemed different now. Not final, not absolute, but incomplete. Something wasn't right. She picked them up again, flipping through the pages more carefully this time. Her eyes traced the language, slower, more deliberate. Numbers, clauses, signatures. And then she saw it again. A section that had been glossed over. Trust allocation. Her breath caught. Emily leaned forward, reading it again, this time fully. The phrasing was careful, intentional, hidden in legal language that most people would skim past. But she didn't skim, not anymore. Her name wasn't just listed as a spouse, it was listed as a beneficiary. Primary. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't just a divorce settlement. It was a structure, a transfer, a protection, or a manipulation. The realization hit her slowly. Daniel hadn't just been ending their marriage. He had been trying to control what came after. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Emily froze. The door handle turned. Marcus stepped in, shaking the cold from his jacket, his presence filling the room with something solid and grounded. He stopped when he saw her. And then he noticed the papers in her hands. His expression didn't change immediately, but something in his posture shifted. Subtle. Guarded. "You all right?" he asked. Emily hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah." Marcus set his keys down slowly, his eyes still on her. "You got company earlier," he said. It wasn't a question. Emily swallowed. "My husband." Marcus nodded once. "Ex," she corrected quietly. A pause. He leaned back slightly against the counter, arms crossing loosely. Not defensive, but not relaxed either. "He didn't look like he belonged here," Marcus said. The words were simple, but they carried something heavier underneath. Emily felt it. "He doesn't," she replied. Marcus's gaze shifted briefly to the envelope in her hands. "Seems like you don't either," he said. It wasn't harsh, but it landed harder than anything Daniel had said. Emily stiffened slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" Marcus held her gaze. "It means," he said slowly, "you got people looking for you. People who got money, lawyers, options." He gestured lightly toward the papers. "That ain't the same world as this." Emily felt her chest tighten. "I didn't ask for any of that," she said. Marcus nodded. "Maybe not." "Then what?" He exhaled, looking away for a second before meeting her eyes again. "Then why you still here?" he asked. The question hung in the air, sharp, unavoidable. Emily opened her mouth, but no answer came. Because the truth was, she didn't fully know. Marcus pushed off the counter, walking a few steps into the room. "I'm not saying you shouldn't be," he added, his voice quieter now. "Just trying to understand." Emily stood slowly, the papers still in her hand. "You think I'm just passing through?" she said. "I think people with your kind of life don't end up here by accident," Marcus replied. "And if they do, they don't stay." The words settled between them, heavy, uncomfortable. Emily felt something rise inside her, something stronger than the fear, stronger than the confusion. Frustration. "You don't know anything about my life," she said. Marcus didn't react. "You think because I had money, or still have money apparently, that everything was easy?" she continued, her voice tightening. "I didn't say that. But you're thinking it." Marcus held her gaze. "I'm thinking you had choices," he said. Emily shook her head, a short, disbelieving sound escaping her. "Choices?" she repeated. "You think I had choices?" Her grip tightened on the papers. "I spent 7 years being told what I wasn't," she said, the words coming faster now. "What I couldn't give, what I couldn't be." Marcus's expression shifted slightly. "You think money fixes that?" she added. Silence. For a moment, neither of them moved. The room felt smaller again. Closer. Marcus looked down briefly, then back up. "No," he said quietly. "I don't." The tension didn't disappear, but it changed. Emily let out a breath, her shoulders dropping slightly. I didn't belong there, she said, softer now. Marcus tilted his head slightly. And you think you belong here? Emily looked around the apartment, the worn couch, the quiet kitchen, the space that had held her when she had nowhere else to go. She hesitated. Then, honestly, I don't know. Marcus studied her for a long second. Then he nodded. That's fair. The edge between them softened just a little. Emily glanced down at the papers again. There's more to this than I thought, she said quietly. Marcus didn't ask, didn't push. He just listened. They didn't just cut me off, she continued. There's something here, something I didn't see before. She looked up at him. I think they were trying to control what happens next. Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. That doesn't surprise me, he said. Emily gave a faint, humorless smile. Yeah, me neither. A silence settled between them again. But this one felt different. Not empty, not tense, just uncertain. Marcus moved back toward the kitchen, grabbing a glass of water. You hungry? He asked. Emily blinked, thrown slightly by the shift. A little. I'll make something. He didn't wait for an answer. Didn't make it a big moment. Just continued. Emily watched him for a second. Then she set the papers down, carefully, because for the first time since she had opened them, they didn't feel like the most important thing in the room. Marcus moved around the kitchen again, steady, focused, present. And Emily realized something she hadn't expected. This wasn't just about where she had come from anymore, or even where she was going. It was about the space in between. The place where two completely different worlds had collided, and neither of them was walking away unchanged. But there was still one question left. One Marcus hadn't asked, one she hadn't answered. If she didn't belong there, and she wasn't sure she belonged here, then where did she really belong? And what would she have to give up to find out? The answer came sooner than she expected. It started with a phone call. Not hers, she still didn't have one, but Marcus's. It rang late that afternoon while he was in the kitchen rinsing dishes. The sound cut through the quiet apartment, sharp and out of place. He glanced at the screen, frowned slightly, then answered. Yeah? Emily didn't mean to listen. She wasn't trying to. But something in his tone, tight, controlled, made it impossible not to. I told you I'd have it by Friday, Marcus said. A pause. No, I hear you. I just said Friday. Another pause. His jaw tightened. I'm not asking for anything, he said quietly. I'm telling you when it's coming. Silence stretched. Then, all right. Yeah. He hung up. Emily watched as he set the phone down a little harder than he needed to. What was that? She asked gently. Marcus didn't answer right away. Then he exhaled, running a hand over the back of his neck. Landlord, he said. Rent's late. Emily felt a small, uncomfortable shift in her chest. How late? Marcus gave a short shrug. Late enough. She hesitated. She said Friday. Yeah, he cut in. That's when I get paid from the kitchen. And I'll handle it. His tone wasn't harsh, but it closed the conversation. Emily nodded slowly. She had seen money problems before, but not like this. Not where a phone call could decide whether someone had a roof over their head. The weight of it settled quietly into the room. Before she could say anything else, there was another knock at the door. Marcus stiffened. Not fear, recognition. I got it, he said, already moving. Emily stayed where she was, but her pulse picked up anyway. Marcus opened the door, and everything shifted. Daniel stood in the hallway again, but this time he wasn't alone. A woman stood beside him, sharp suit, hair pulled back tight, a leather folder tucked under her arm. Her eyes scanned the apartment in a single sweep, precise and calculated. "Marcus Reed?" she asked. Marcus didn't move. "Who's asking?" The woman stepped forward slightly, professional, composed. "My name is Karen Holt. I represent Daniel Carter." Emily's stomach dropped. Daniel didn't look at her right away. He looked at Marcus. Then, finally, his gaze shifted to Emily. "This doesn't have to get messy," he said. Marcus's expression hardened. "You showed up at my door," he replied. "Looks messy already." Karen stepped in before Daniel could respond. "We're here to resolve a situation," she said smoothly. "Privately, if possible." Emily stood up. "No," she said. Both of them looked at her. "No what?" Daniel asked. "No private conversation," she said. "Say whatever you're here to say." Karen exchanged a quick glance with Daniel, then nodded. "Very well." She opened the folder. "Emily Carter," she began, her voice calm, measured. "You are listed as a primary beneficiary in a family trust currently under review. Due to recent developments, there are concerns regarding your current circumstances." Emily felt her hands tighten at her sides. "What concerns?" Karen didn't hesitate. "Your association with this residence," she said, gesturing slightly around the apartment, "and the individuals within it." The words landed like a slap. Marcus didn't react outwardly, but Emily felt the shift beside her. "Say it straight," Marcus said quietly. Karen met his gaze. "We're offering Ms. Carter a reinstatement of financial and legal protections," she said. "Housing, assets, full access to the trust." Emily's heart pounded. "And what's the catch?" she asked. Daniel stepped forward. "You come back," he said. "You sign the agreement. And you stop all of this." "All of what?" He glanced around again, his expression tightening. "This," he repeated. Emily felt heat rise in her chest. "And if I don't?" Karen closed the folder slowly. "Then you forfeit everything," she said. "The trust, the assets, the protections, all of it." Silence filled the room. Heavy, final. Emily's mind raced. Everything. Gone. Just like that. She glanced at Marcus. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the floor. His jaw tight, his shoulders rigid. Like he already knew the answer. Like he had seen this ending before. Emily felt something crack inside her. "You think I'd just walk back into that?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Daniel's expression softened slightly, almost convincing. "It's where you belong," he said. The words echoed. "You don't belong here." Emily looked around the apartment, the worn couch, the quiet kitchen, the place where her hands had stopped shaking. Then she looked at Marcus, still silent, still not looking at her. Because in his mind, this was already over. "You don't get to decide that," she said. Daniel's jaw tightened. "I'm trying to help you," he said. "No," she replied. "You're trying to control me." Karen stepped in again, her tone still calm, but firmer now. "Ms. Carter, this is a limited-time offer. If you walk away, there will be no second opportunity." Emily's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Everything she had known, everything she had been told she needed, standing right in front of her. All she had to do was walk away from this place, from Marcus, from the only person who had stopped. She took a step forward. Marcus finally looked up. Their eyes met. There was no expectation in his gaze, no plea, just understanding. Like he had already accepted whatever choice she made. That hurt more than anything. Emily turned back to Daniel, and for a second, the old life pulled at her. The safety, the certainty, the version of herself that had never had to sit on a frozen bench and wonder if she would make it through the night. But then she remembered something else. The scarf, the soup, the way Marcus hadn't asked for anything in return. And she realized this wasn't just a choice between two places. It was a choice between two versions of herself. She took a breath and spoke. No. The word was quiet, but it didn't waver. Daniel stared at her. Karen blinked just slightly. I'm not coming back, Emily said. The silence that followed felt different. Not heavy, not uncertain. Final. Daniel's expression hardened, the softness gone. You're making a mistake, he said again. Maybe, she replied. Karen closed the folder. Then this conversation is over. They turned to leave. Daniel paused at the door, glancing back one last time. You won't get another chance, he said. Emily didn't respond. He stepped out. The door closed. And just like that, it was done. The room felt different, quieter, but not empty. Emily let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Then she turned. Marcus was still standing there, still watching her. But something in his expression had changed. Not relief, not gratitude. Something else. Something heavier. You didn't have to do that, he said. Emily frowned slightly. Yes, I did. Marcus shook his head slowly. They just offered you everything, he said, and you turned it down. For what? The question hung there, sharp, uncomfortable. Emily felt it. Because she didn't have a perfect answer, not one that made sense on paper. But she had something else. She looked at him. For this, she said. Marcus's expression didn't soften. If anything, it tightened. You don't even know what this is, he said quietly. Emily held his gaze. No, she admitted. But I know what that was. The silence stretched. And for the first time, Marcus didn't look convinced. Because now the question wasn't whether she would stay. It was whether he believed she should. Marcus didn't move. The apartment felt smaller again, like the walls had inched closer without anyone noticing. The echo of the door closing still lingered, the weight of what had just happened pressing into every corner of the room. Emily stood across from him, her hands still at her sides, her heartbeat slowly coming down from the rush of adrenaline. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Marcus let out a quiet breath and walked past her. Not angry, not loud, just distant. He moved into the kitchen, picking up a dish that didn't need washing, rinsing it anyway. The sound of running water filled the silence, steady and controlled. Emily watched him. You think I made the wrong choice, she said. He didn't look at her. I think you made a choice, he replied. That's not the same thing. Marcus turned off the water, setting the dish aside carefully before finally facing her. "No," he said. "It's not." The space between them felt heavier now than it had all day. "You don't trust it," Emily said quietly. Marcus's expression tightened just slightly. "I don't trust how fast things change," he said. Emily frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, choosing his words carefully, "people don't walk away from everything like that. Not without a reason." "I had a reason." "You had a lot of reasons," he replied. "That's what worries me." Emily took a step closer. "I didn't do it for some plan," she said. "I did it because it felt right." Marcus gave a small, almost humorless shake of his head. "Yeah," he said, "that's not always enough." The words landed harder than she expected. For a second, she didn't know what to say. Because part of her understood. Marcus wasn't rejecting her. He was protecting something. His home, his kids, the life he had built with nothing but effort and stubbornness. And she had just walked into it, carrying everything he didn't trust. Emily let out a slow breath. "I'm not going to hurt you," she said. Marcus didn't respond. Not because he didn't hear her, but because he couldn't promise he believed it. The silence stretched again. Then, from down the hallway, a door creaked open. Small footsteps. Eli's voice, still soft with sleep. "Dad?" Marcus turned immediately. "Hey," he said, his tone shifting without effort. "What's up?" "I had a bad dream," Eli mumbled. Marcus crossed the room in 2 steps, crouching down to meet him. "You want to talk about it?" Eli shook his head, leaning into him. Marcus rested a hand on the back of his son's head, steady and calm. "It's all right," he said. "You're good." Emily stood back, watching. The tension in the room didn't disappear, but it changed, softened. Because this right here, was real. Not complicated, not layered with contracts or expectations. Just a father and his child. Eli glanced past Marcus, his eyes landing on Emily. "You still here?" he asked. Emily nodded. "Yeah," she said. Eli smiled, small but certain. "Good," he said, like that was all that mattered. Marcus looked back at her then, and for a second, something shifted in his expression. Not trust, not yet, but something closer to reconsideration. He stood, guiding Eli back toward the hallway. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you back to bed." Eli hesitated, then turned back toward Emily again. "You're not leaving, right?" The question landed in the center of the room. Simple, direct, unavoidable. Emily felt it hit somewhere deeper than anything Daniel or Marcus had said. She met Eli's gaze. "I'm not planning to," she said. Eli nodded, satisfied. "Okay." Marcus watched that exchange closely. Then he led Eli back down the hallway. The door closed softly behind them. Emily stood alone in the living room again. But this time, it didn't feel the same. She walked slowly to the couch, sitting down, her hands resting in her lap. The room was quiet again, but her mind wasn't. Marcus didn't trust her. Not fully. And she couldn't blame him. Everything about her life screamed temporary, unstable, complicated. She leaned back, staring up at the ceiling. What had she really done? She had walked away from everything she knew, without a plan, without a backup, without even understanding what she had left behind. And now, she was here, in a place she didn't fully belong, with people who didn't fully trust her, trying to hold on to something she couldn't quite define. The heater clicked on again, filling the space with a low hum. Emily closed her eyes. Not to sleep, just to breathe. And for a moment, everything went still. No voices, no pressure, no expectations, just the quiet. And in that quiet, something settled. Not certainty, not clarity, just a decision. She wasn't leaving. Not tomorrow, not when things got uncomfortable, not when someone questioned her place here. Because for the first time in a long time, she wasn't running from something. She was choosing something. And that mattered. Emily opened her eyes. The room looked the same. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. Because somewhere between the storm, the door, and this quiet moment, she had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Outside, the city lights flickered against the dark sky. Inside, the silence held. But it wasn't empty anymore. It was waiting. Because what came next wasn't going to be easy. And deep down, Emily knew it. The calm she felt right now was only the space before everything shifted again. Morning came faster than Emily expected. Not gently, not quietly, but all at once. A loud thud echoed from the kitchen, followed by Eli's voice rising in frustration. "I didn't do it!" "You dropped it," his sister shot back, sharper, already fully awake. "I didn't mean to." Emily opened her eyes, disoriented for half a second before reality settled back in. The couch, the apartment, the life she had stepped into. The noise didn't stop. Cabinet doors opened and closed. A chair scraped across the floor. Marcus's voice cut through it all, not loud, but steady, grounding everything. "All right, slow down," he said. "What happened?" "The milk," Eli mumbled. "It exploded," his sister added. "It didn't explode." Emily pushed herself up slowly, the blanket slipping from her shoulders. For a moment, she just sat there, listening. There was chaos, but it wasn't the kind that broke things. It was the kind that meant something was alive. She stood and walked into the kitchen. Milk spread across the counter, dripping slowly onto the floor. Eli stood frozen beside it, wide-eyed, while his sister had already grabbed a towel, trying to contain the mess. Marcus was in the middle of it, one hand on Eli's shoulder, the other reaching for another cloth. "It's fine," he said. "We clean it up, we move on." Emily didn't think. She just stepped in. "Here," she said, grabbing a second towel. "You missed a spot." The girl glanced at her, surprised, then nodded quickly. Eli looked up at her, uncertain. "It's okay," Emily said gently. "Happens all the time." He relaxed, just a little. Marcus watched the interaction closely. Didn't say anything, but he saw it. They cleaned up the mess together, no blame, no raised voices, just movement, hands working side by side. Within minutes, the counter was wiped down, the floor dry again, the moment already fading. And yet, something had changed. Emily felt it. Not dramatic, not obvious, just a shift. Breakfast followed in a blur, plates set down, quick bites taken, backpacks slung over shoulders. And without thinking, Emily found herself stepping into the rhythm. "Your zipper's stuck," she told Eli, kneeling slightly to fix it. "Thanks," he said. "You forgot your notebook," she added to his sister. The girl blinked, then ran back to grab it. Marcus stood near the doorway, keys in hand, watching everything unfold. There was something different in his expression now, still cautious, but no longer closed. The kids rushed out, laughter echoing down the hallway. Then it was just the two of them again. The apartment settled into quiet. Marcus leaned against the door for a second after closing it. "You didn't have to do that," he said. Emily shrugged lightly. "It needed to be done." He studied her. "That's not what I meant." She met his gaze. "I know," she said. A pause. Then, softer. "I'm not just passing through." Marcus didn't respond immediately. But this time, he didn't push back either. The silence stretched, but it wasn't as sharp as before. Emily turned back toward the table, picking up the empty plates. "Let me help with this," she said. "You don't have to, I know." She said it the same way he had. Simple. Final. Marcus watched her for a second longer, then nodded once. "All right." They worked in quiet, but this time it wasn't uncertain. It was functional, natural. And somewhere in the middle of that quiet, Emily made another decision. "I need to go out today," she said. Marcus glanced up. "Where?" "I'm not sure yet," she admitted, "but I need to figure out what those papers actually mean." He nodded slowly. "You want me to come with you?" The offer surprised her. She shook her head gently. "No," she said. "This is something I need to do on my own." Marcus didn't argue. "All right." Emily dried her hands and reached for the envelope. This time, it didn't feel like something she was holding on to. It felt like something she was about to confront. Downtown Chicago looked different in daylight, sharper, colder in a different way. Emily stood in front of a glass building she had walked into dozens of times before. Only now, she saw it clearly. The height, the distance, the way people moved in and out without ever really seeing each other. She stepped inside. The lobby was exactly the same. Polished floors, quiet voices, controlled lighting. But she wasn't. "Miss Carter?" A receptionist looked up, surprise flickering across her face. Emily didn't smile. "I need to speak with legal," she said. Moments later, she was sitting across from a man in a tailored suit, his expression carefully neutral. "We weren't expecting you," he said. "I'm not here for expectations," Emily replied. "I'm here for answers." She slid the papers across the table. "I want you to explain this to me," she said. He adjusted his glasses, scanning the documents. Then he looked up. And for the first time, there was something in his expression. Not surprise. Recognition. "You didn't know," he said quietly. Emily's stomach tightened. "Know what?" He leaned back slightly. "Miss Carter," he said, choosing his words carefully, "this trust was never meant to be taken from you." The room felt suddenly smaller. "What?" "It was structured to protect your assets," he continued, "not transfer them away." Emily's pulse spiked. "That's not what Daniel said." The lawyer gave a small, measured nod. "I imagine it isn't." Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Emily leaned forward slightly. "How much?" she asked. The man hesitated, then answered. "The current valuation is just over 200 million. The number didn't feel real. It didn't land the way it should have, because in that moment, it wasn't about the money. It was about the truth. Everything Daniel had said, everything she had believed, everything she had walked away from. It had all been built on something else, something hidden, something controlled. Emily sat back slowly, her mind racing. 200 million. And she had spent the night on a freezing bench. Because she didn't know. Because someone had made sure she didn't know. The lawyer watched her carefully. "Miss Carter," he said, "you have full control. Effective immediately. If you choose to claim it. If you choose." The words echoed. Choice. She had more of it now than she had ever realized. Emily stood. Without another word, she gathered the papers. "Thank you," she said, and then she walked out. The city felt different again when she stepped outside. Not bigger, not smaller, just clearer. Cars passed, people moved, life continued. But Emily stood still for a moment. 200 million. And yet, the first place she thought of wasn't the penthouse, wasn't Daniel. It was a small apartment on the south side, a worn couch, a boy who trusted her without question, a man who had given her a scarf without asking who she was. Emily let out a slow breath. Because now, the choice wasn't about survival anymore. It was about something else entirely. What she was going to do with everything she had just found. And who she was going to become because of it. Emily didn't go back right away. She walked. Down streets she had never really seen before. Past storefronts with faded signs. Past people who moved with purpose. Past lives that didn't revolve around glass towers and silent elevators. The cold air still lingered, but it didn't bite the same way anymore. Not when she understood something she hadn't before. She had never been powerless. She had just been kept in the dark. Her phone was still gone. Her old life still out of reach in the practical sense. But now she knew the truth. And truth changed everything. Emily stopped at the corner of a busy street, watching traffic pass. 200 million. The number felt distant. Because the only thing that felt real was a small apartment on the south side, Marcus, Eli. A life built from nothing but effort. She turned and headed back. The building looked the same, worn, quiet, unnoticed. Emily climbed the stairs slower this time, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of what she carried now. Not the papers, the decision. She reached the door, paused, then stepped inside. Marcus was at the table, a stack of bills spread out in front of him. His jacket hung over the back of a chair, his sleeves rolled up, his posture slightly hunched. He looked up when she entered. For a second, his expression didn't change. Then something flickered. "You're back," he said. Emily nodded. "Yeah." She closed the door behind her, the sound soft but final. Marcus watched her for a moment. "You get what you needed?" Emily stepped forward slowly, placing the envelope on the table. "I got the truth," she said. He didn't reach for it, didn't ask. "All right," he said. That was it. No curiosity, no push, just acceptance. And for some reason, that made it harder. Emily looked at the bills spread out in front of him. "Is that everything?" she asked. Marcus followed her gaze. "Most of it." "How much do you owe?" He leaned back slightly, a faint edge creeping into his voice. "Why?" Emily met his eyes. "Because I want to help." Marcus shook his head immediately. "No." She didn't flinch. "You didn't even hear what I was going to say." "I don't need to," he replied. Emily stepped closer. "This isn't charity," she said. "It's not pity." "Then what is it?" "It's fixing something that shouldn't be broken." Marcus let out a quiet breath, shaking his head again. "You don't fix things like this with money," he said. "Sometimes you do. And sometimes you don't understand what you're stepping into." The words landed, but they didn't stop her. 200 million, she said. The number sat in the air. Marcus froze. For the first time since she had met him, he looked caught off guard. "What?" he said. "That's what the trust is worth," Emily continued. "That's what they tried to keep from me." Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Marcus stared at her, searching her face for something, doubt, exaggeration, anything that would make it make sense. "You serious?" he asked quietly. "Yes." The room felt different now. Not smaller, not closer, just shifted. Marcus leaned back slowly, processing. "And you walked away from that?" he said. Emily shook her head. "I didn't walk away," she said. "I didn't know." Another silence. Then Marcus let out a short breath, running a hand over his face. "Yeah," he muttered. "That tracks." Emily stepped closer to the table. "I can fix this," she said, gesturing to the bills. "Not just for you, for everyone in this building." Marcus looked up sharply. "No," he said again, firmer this time. Emily didn't back down. "Why not?" "Because that's not how this works." "How does it work then?" she challenged. "You keep struggling? You keep getting calls from landlords? You keep doing everything on your own until something breaks?" Marcus stood. The chair scraped softly against the floor.
You think money solves what this is?
He asked. Emily held his gaze.
I think it gives you a chance to breathe.
Marcus shook his head.
It gives people a reason to look at me different,
He said.
to treat me different, to expect something back.
I don't expect anything.
Not now,
He replied.
but that changes.
The words hit harder than she expected. Emily felt it. Because part of her knew he wasn't wrong. But that didn't mean she was either.
I'm not trying to change you.
She said quietly.
I'm trying to stand next to you.
Marcus didn't respond immediately. He studied her. Really studied her. And for the first time, he didn't just see the woman from the bus stop or the woman from the penthouse. He saw something else. Something in between.
You don't belong in this fight,
He said finally. Emily's voice softened.
Maybe I do now.
Silence.
The kind that doesn't rush to be filled.
Then, slowly, Marcus looked down at the bills again, at the life he had been carrying, piece by piece, at the weight he had never asked anyone to help him with. And something shifted. Not surrender, not acceptance, just consideration. Evi's voice echoed from the hallway, breaking the moment. "Dad, where's my—" He stopped when he saw Emily. "You're back!" he said, his face lighting up instantly. Emily smiled, small but real. "Yeah," she said. Eli ran into the room, stopping just short of the table. "Are you staying?" he asked. The question landed again. Simple, direct. Emily glanced at Marcus, then back at Eli. "I think so," she said. Eli grinned. "Good," he said. Marcus watched the exchange, and this time, he didn't look away. Because something had changed, not just for Emily, not just for him, but for the space between them. The man who had been overlooked his entire life was now standing in a moment where everything could shift, not because someone saved him, but because someone saw him and chose to stay anyway. The days didn't change all at once. There was no single moment where everything became easier, where the weight Marcus carried disappeared, where Emily suddenly fit perfectly into a life that had been built long before she arrived. Instead, things shifted slowly, quietly, one small decision at a time. The first change was simple. Emily stayed, not just for a night, not just until things were figured out. She stayed the next morning, and the one after that, and the one after that. At first, Marcus didn't say anything about it. He didn't ask how long, didn't ask what her plan was. He just made space. Not a big announcement, not a formal invitation, just small adjustments. An extra plate at breakfast, a second cup of coffee poured without asking, a blanket folded and left on the couch before she needed it. Emily noticed all of it, because that's how Marcus did things, quietly, without making it about himself. The second change came from her. She didn't write a check, didn't transfer money, didn't try to solve everything overnight. Instead, she listened. She learned. She paid attention. She saw which neighbor worked double shifts and still worried about groceries, which hallway light flickered every night and never got fixed, which kids walked home from school alone because their parents were still at work. And she understood something she hadn't before. This wasn't just about one man. It was about a whole system of people carrying too much, alone. So she started small. The broken hallway light got replaced. No announcement, no explanation. Just fixed. Then the laundry machines downstairs stopped eating quarters. Someone had repaired them. No one knew who. But people noticed, and slowly, things began to change. Marcus noticed too. Of course he did. He just didn't say anything at first. He watched, the same way he had watched her that first night, carefully, waiting to see if it was real, waiting to see if it would last. One evening, he found her in the kitchen going through a stack of papers. Not the divorce papers, different ones. "What's that?" he asked. Emily looked up. "Property records," she said. Marcus frowned slightly. "For what?" She hesitated, then answered honestly. "For this building." Silence. Marcus leaned against the doorway. "You serious?" Emily nodded. "I'm not buying it to own it," she said quickly. "I'm buying it so no one here has to worry about getting pushed out." Marcus didn't move. "Emily, I'm not changing anything," she continued. "I'm not raising rent. I'm not flipping it. She stopped, searching for the right words. "I want people to feel like they can stay," she finished. Marcus studied her. Longer this time. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know." "Then why are you?" Emily held his gaze. "Because someone did it for me," she said quietly. Marcus didn't respond right away, but something in his expression shifted again. Not doubt, not resistance, something closer to understanding. The third change came from the neighborhood. At first, people were cautious. They had seen help come with conditions before, promises that didn't last, people who showed up with good intentions and disappeared just as quickly. But Emily didn't disappear. She showed up. Every day, helping where she could, listening more than she spoke. And over time, the way people looked at her changed. Not all at once, but enough. Marcus saw that too. And one night, sitting on the steps outside the building, he finally said it. "You're still here." Emily smiled slightly. "Yeah." He looked out at the street, quiet for a moment. "Most people wouldn't be." "I'm not most people," he nodded. "That's what I'm starting to realize." The air was cool, but not cold, the kind of night that felt steady. Emily leaned back slightly, looking up at the sky between the buildings. "I thought money was the thing that made everything work," she said. Marcus let out a quiet breath. "It helps," he said. "Yeah," she admitted, "but it's not the thing." He glanced at her. "No," he said, "it's not." A pause. Then Marcus spoke again. "You didn't save me," he said. Emily turned to him. "I wasn't trying to." "I know," he replied. "That's why it matters." The words settled between them. Simple, honest, real. Months passed. The building changed. Not dramatically. Not in a way that erased what it had been, but in small, meaningful ways. Things got fixed. People felt safer, lighter. Marcus still worked, still woke up early, still carried his responsibilities the same way he always had. But now, he wasn't the only one carrying them. And Emily was no longer the woman on the bench. She wasn't the woman in the penthouse either. She was something else, something new, someone who had chosen where she stood. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the buildings, casting everything in a soft gold light, Eli ran up the steps toward them. "Dinner's ready," he shouted. Marcus stood, brushing his hands together. "Coming," he called back. Emily stood too. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Not strangers anymore. Not uncertain. Just there. Together. "You ever think about that night?" Emily asked. Marcus nodded. "Sometimes." She smiled faintly. "Me too." He tilted his head slightly. "Best decision I ever made," he said. Emily shook her head gently. "No," she replied. "It wasn't just yours." He frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" She stepped past him, heading toward the door. "It was mine, too," she said. Marcus watched her for a second, then followed. Inside, the apartment was warm. Laughter filled the space. Plates were already set on the table. And for the first time in a long time, everything felt exactly where it was supposed to be. Emily paused for just a second in the doorway, taking it in. The noise, the warmth, the life. This wasn't where she had started, but it was where she had chosen to be. And that made all the difference. Because she hadn't been saved, not really. She had been given something else. A moment, a choice, a chance to build something real. And she had taken it. One step at a time, starting on the coldest night of her life, when one person didn't walk past. And everything changed because of it. If this story touched you, leave a comment below. It all came down to one simple moment, when Marcus chose to stop in the freezing night and offer a scarf to a stranger who had nothing left. That small act didn't just warm Emily, it gave her a reason to stand back up. This story reminds us that real kindness doesn't wait for the perfect moment or the perfect person. It shows up quietly, even when it's misunderstood, even when no one is watching. Today, you don't need money or power to make a difference. Just do what Marcus did. The next time you see someone struggling, don't walk past. Pause, ask, and be the person who stops. Have you ever had a moment where a stranger changed your life in ways you never expected? Tell me in the comments below. And stay with me, because the next story might change the way you see someone you've been overlooking all along.